Welcome to Health Law Talk, presented by Shahardy Sherman Williams. Health law broken down through expert discussion, real client issues, and real-life experiences. Breaking barriers to understanding complex healthcare issues is our job.
And good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Health Law Talk with Shahardy Sherman Williams. Conrad Meyer, solo today, behind the microphone here at Shahardy Sherman Williams. But I have a special guest in the studio, my friend, colleague, another healthcare attorney, Beau Haynes.
Thank you for having me, Conrad. Good morning, good afternoon to the Health Law Talk audience.
That's great. I mean, I've been trying. So for everyone, Beau and I have known each other, oh boy, probably at least 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, and so Beau is a colleague. We have a lot of things that we work together with. And I've been trying to grab Beau to come down to the studio to come and sit down with me and just talk. You know, and so he finally he came today. You showed up. Yes. I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me, and I'm excited about this. Where do you want to start today?
Well, I would like, just for background purposes, tell everybody what you do. I mean, people know. I mean, they know that I'm a healthcare attorney. You're a healthcare attorney. Yeah. What is it that you do? Where do you work? What's your background? Sure. What kind of things do you do?
Sure. So I guess I've been practicing about 19 years. Loyola College of Law, 2004 grad. I'm from Indiana originally, and I have my undergrad from IU Bloomington. I have a BS in public health with a focus on health administration. So I've always kind of had a kind of healthcare path, so to speak, similar to you with your master's degree. And so when I went to law school, I was lucky enough to clerk for a boutique healthcare firm that kind of launched my career into this kind of niche space. I spent most of my career at that boutique firm, had a 2-year in-house experience at Ochsner Health System. And then about 6 years ago, I lateraled over to Phelps Dunbar here in New Orleans to kind of help build their healthcare practice, and I've been a partner there, for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years.
And I mean, I know you've been doing it a long time.
Yeah,
I mean, we know each other,
and we have some overlap.
We do
in our skill sets. I am more transactional, regulatory, and compliance focused. I think the easiest way to describe it is anything that touches the professional life of a healthcare provider.
Yes.
Whether that's a physician, a hospital, a pharmacist, a pharmacy, a nurse practitioner, we typically handle. So it's regulatory questions, contracts, employment agreements, mergers and acquisitions, Stark Law questions, new areas.
Fun stuff.
Yes, new areas of healthcare like telehealth and medical marijuana.
Medical marijuana, big deal.
Yeah. I am not a litigator, so I think that's where you and I practices kind of diverge a little bit.
We do. I mean, I cross over on the similar side, the compliance and some transactional work, but I have no problem going to court.
Yeah,
and I have no problem arguing in front of licensing boards and whatever.
See, I don't think I've been in a courtroom since like my first couple of years.
They're kind of fun, depending if the judge is nice to you, right?
Right. So I feel like I'm out of one of those awful legal shows you see on Netflix where it's like the attorney that, never goes to court.
My mom is watching Suits right now and loves that show.
Have you seen that? Embarrassed to say that I binged it on Netflix.
Did you binge it?
I did.
I try to tell my mom, I said,
it's awful.
It's awful.
But
that is not how law firms work.
I agree.
All those people do is walk in the hall all day.
Oh, yeah.
When do they ever work?
Right. You crank out the $1 billion deal within the span of 2 hours.
2 hours? Yeah, that never happens.
Yeah. It's insane.
And I can tell you this, no one looks as good in law firms, right? Like the Suits, or Boston Legal. I'm like, where do they find these?
Yeah.
That's not what people look like, or act like, or dress like, or anything.
They're well dressed. They have all these, interesting hobbies.
High teas
like they're, somebody likes classic cars and
Right.
has a wine collection and,
And you notice their desks are always so clean. Like there's never any paper on the desk. I'm like, that's not law.
I strive for that, but I think it would, it's
I have some colleagues who can do that. I kind of live in a I know where my things are kind of deal, but on the show it's just so unrealistic. But anyway, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah.
So when for those who don't know, Beau and I personally, we both are adjunct professors at Loyola Law School, and we've been teaching together now for almost a decade. And whether it was a skills class starting off with, and then teaching courses, and that's been a fun journey. By the way,
it has.
That's been a fun journey.
Yes.
So you and I we not only have crossover, we have literally sat in the same classroom and taught, 20 plus semesters of students for the last 10 years.
Yes.
Which is, wow.
Yes, I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And we did it all out of the kindness of our heart.
We did.
Yes, we did.
We did. Absolutely. We are altruistic and we are giving back to our alma mater.
Yes, we did do that. So you know what? One of the things that we ask and I think comes up a lot is how in the world did we get into this? And if you're interested in this, even if you're a student or you're going through this, even some professional medical students who want to learn more about law, how do you get into the healthcare field?
Right.
And aside from just going to undergrad and taking a few classes.
Right. No, that's a good question. I think your path or journey, as the kids like to say today, I think first and foremost, I think you really have to have an interest in healthcare, right?
Right.
That goes without saying. I think for law students, I think you can look at it from a different perspective. If you don't really have an interest in healthcare, the other way to maybe describe, I think a large portion of your practice and almost all of mine is you're kind of a business lawyer that only does healthcare work.
Yes.
Right. And so if you're a, IP or intellectual property, is an interest of yours, if you like real estate tax, whatever the flavor is, labor and employment,
right?
The healthcare industry is something you should focus on because I think it generates, a lot of interesting subspecialties of the law in terms of the type of work you see that come out of the type of clients we represent, that I think sometimes goes overlooked a little bit. And because I just don't think some of the types of healthcare providers that we see as clients is typically on the radar of a law student that's kind of looking for opportunity in a related specialty, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I get that. With the students we teach, how do I get in? What do I do?
Yeah.
And I like the idea that, and people don't know this, but the GDP, the amount of money that we spend nationwide on healthcare is almost 20%.
Right.
Which is just astonishing.
Right.
So, if you got that much money.
Yeah. And it's almost like a large health system as a client is almost like a little city that you represent.
Yes. If you're lucky enough to get that.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
And so, but I think to your point though, and I've started off our class, every year, you've heard me say this, is healthcare casts a large shadow over our economy, just as you said, in terms of our spending,
right?
Our political discussions, our day in, day out decisions, for a lot of us of a certain age, healthcare is going to be a major part of our life when we talk about, our aging parents and the baby boomer generation and
no
how
doubt.
That's going to impact us. Probably more so than maybe prior generations have seen, just because of life expectancy, and you're having I guess the largest or the second largest generation consuming healthcare resources, at a time in their life where they're going to need, those younger generations to kind of help, plan for them. So I just think, as I said, it casts such a large shadow over, our daily lives, and so kind of taking that kind of broad view of it, it's an opportunity to you really get into an industry that's always changing and is obviously not going anywhere, for lack of a better term. So.
Well, let me ask you this, because I mean, we talked about this,
Yeah.
and we talk about it in class.
Yeah.
I talk about it at other places. The industry that we speak of,
Yeah.
and what we're seeing, even as healthcare lawyers now, is it broken? I mean, it's simple. Is it broken? I mean, or I get, and it's all perspective based, right? So when you look at like a Canadian healthcare system, right, and they have like a single payer system,
right?
So I mean, and we're starting, you know, we've been hearing the drum beats about single payer for a long time. So my question is, you know, comparatively from what you're seeing, from what you're hearing, you know, broken, not broken?
I don't know that it's broken. I think we've taken pieces of the systems that have worked in other parts of the world and kind of piled it on top of other components of our system here, and then it doesn't quite fit. So it's almost like a mishmash of, you know.
So we get a bouillabaisse of all these things, right?
The gumbo,
the gumbo, right?
And so I think that's where there's a lot of issues in terms of gaps of care, gaps for payment, gaps for coverage, and I'm using gaps generically, but I think then all those issues kind of become politicized, and then, you know, whether that's the insurance lobby, the hospital lobby,
everybody wants a piece,
you know, and the change in administrations, regardless of where you are and your political views, you know, and so I just think it's unless we are truly going to embrace a system, whatever that is, whether it's single payer or, but I think
a hybrid.
Yeah. But even that, it's like, you know, we can't be a little bit here, a little bit there, and all these different systems. And I think it'll just continue to be dysfunctional a little bit is probably a polite way to put it.
My students say that, because I teach at UNO too, and basically I taught to my UNO master's class, their MHA class, right? And usually the first lecture is always on delivery system, right?
And so components,
other components, right? And then we go into other countries' healthcare systems, and we talked about Canada, because we actually have a Canadian student in the class.
Oh, so that's pretty cool that they can.
Not only a Canadian, I have a student from Canada. I've got a student from Nigeria. So I have the Nigerian perspective, and then I've got a student. I want to say either Peru or Colombia. So I have different things.
Yeah,
you know, and so the Canadian student was talking about, well, yeah, if you want to go get X, Y, and Z, if you break your leg, sure, you get the emergency treatment, but say you need to go have it set, or you need an MRI for something. You know, you're on a 6-month wait to get an MRI.
Jeez.
And I thought to myself, and I asked them, and we were talking about that in the United States. And I asked her, so why is it 6-month wait? And she said, well, they only have so many MRI machines in Canada.
So it's an
access issue. Yep. And so my question is what would you think Americans do if they were told, you can't get an MRI? Well, you're not going to pay for it. It'll be free. But regardless of whatever neck, back, shoulder, whatever pain you're feeling with, you're not going to get in there for 6 months. How do you think people would react?
Oh, they go crazy, or they just be indifferent to it, just never get it, or go somewhere else.
Or go somewhere else that they could, maybe, right?
Are you seeing that a lot where people travel internationally for access?
On the cosmetic side, and for other things that
and expense
side, right? They'll go south of the border.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
I'm curious.
And even Canada is able to procure medications, from what I understand. Like I remember the insulin where people were going across. Remember that?
Right. Yep.
You know, but even though that happens, you know, we talked about how do we reconcile the culture of, and what I call, I'm using these euphemisms of Burger King, you know, my way right away now. That's the way Americans think. I want it my way right away now. Right.
Immediate access, immediate gratification. Yeah.
There is 0 inhibitory response delay from the culture here. Correct. Yeah. So how do you negate that with the idea of, you know, the Canadian system where your taxes would be massively affected to cover everybody, right?
Right. And
It's tough.
yeah, I agree.
Tough. I mean, it's really tough.
Yeah, and I don't know that if you move it into the political arena, I don't know that, and maybe it's purposeful, maybe it's, just, self-preservation, whatever, that we typically do a good job of explaining, the goals of maybe a single payer system or a different system or a hybrid system.
We can talk about it. That's for sure.
Yeah. But we don't,
doing it's a different deal.
Yeah. And I worry that maybe just the communication is always an issue on kind of people understanding what it is.
Well, speaking of communication, how many times have you heard from a politician on communication? And I'm going to say one quote. Ready? We're going to provide high quality, low cost health care.
Yes. Right.
How many times have you heard that?
Yes.
I mean, that's like a buzzword.
Right.
Right.
Right. For 30 years. Right.
Right. And it's like, wait,
so
who comes up with that? That's a feel good.
Yeah, I agree. I
want to grab those guys and say, you have zero idea about what you're talking about.
So my one question, I guess you mentioned your master's students.
Yeah. It was a good conversation we had.
Yeah. Well, and I just kind of want to get your thought on this because I did a semester, I think, at Tulane.
Yeah.
What I found interesting was, and this is not a negative thing towards the many talented and bright law students we've had at Loyola, but I thought the MPH, MHA students were, I enjoyed teaching them, not more, but in terms of engagement and kind of facilitating discussion where they were kind of thinking outside the box because their focus was only healthcare.
Right.
Versus, I think the challenge of teaching,
law students,
Jimmy or Jimmy or Susie law student,
right,
who has no healthcare background, the fundamentals of healthcare, and then trying to, and the healthcare delivery system, and then trying to give them enough baseline information or bench, to then kind of have engaging discussions on all the different, regulatory,
right,
and I always found that challenging. So I always enjoyed the perspectives from the master's students because they are healthcare focused, and law is kind of or the regulatory overlays like just one part of their education.
Right.
But they come with so much more of a baseline in terms of knowledge, and so I always enjoyed their creative view on things or kind of where they've been because I think the backgrounds are probably more diverse, or at least that's been my experience in the master's program.
They are. And let me tell you, they're totally focused on healthcare. Yeah. And so what's interesting, especially for my master's students, is that some of them are actually in the healthcare administration already there. So when we talk about delivery and some challenges or regulatory or fraud or HIPAA, whatever the flavor of the law regulation is today, they see it. Mm-hmm. They get it. And so I love that, and the fact that I had a Canadian student in there that could talk about what it's like. And then I just let them discuss. Like she talked about the MRI issue, for example. Right. And I just turned to the class and I said, how does that make y'all feel?
Right, exactly.
And no one liked it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, see, I said, so this change that everybody wants, it's going to be very, very hard.
No, that's interesting.
And then the Nigerian student, her take, you want to hear about this? This is unbelievable. She said, well, there's not even a single payer. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, if you are in an accident in Nigeria, you better have a bag of cash. And because when you show up to the ER, you better say, I've got a bag of cash to treat me.
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, and I looked at the rest, I said, how does that make y'all feel? And everyone was stunned.
Right.
I don't know if that takes place. I'm not an expert in Nigerian healthcare delivery. Let me premise that. I've never been to Nigeria. I don't know. I'm just hearing what one student from Nigeria said that, and that blew me away.
That's wow.
And I asked I said, how would you like to be in the, go quick, honey, get the backpack, the go bag of $10,000 in cash to make sure we get treated.
Right.
That's crazy.
That's insane.
Yes.
That's insane.
Nuts.
But you're right. It takes us out of kind of our myopic view of
right.
the world when you're able to kind of open up dialogue with, folks from different backgrounds, whether they're here or abroad, but, and just hear how they interact with, the healthcare system.
And the one thing, most of these students work in some of the healthcare fields already,
Right.
but other ones too, that they're so young.
Yeah.
They haven't even been in the system yet.
Right.
Because they're not sick.
Oh, yeah. Well, do you remember, I think.
Remember that?
Yeah. Well, I think we were doing one of our kind of joint lectures. I think this is obviously at Loyola, and we were talking about the movement or the acceptance of telehealth during and post-COVID, whereas before, not everyone,
it's
in terms
changed.
of patients, understood it except for a certain generation. But I mean, I remember doing a show of hands, like, how many people have had a telehealth visit before, March 2020, and
Nobody.
And then afterwards it was the
Everybody.
entire class. Which I was a little surprised for that generation, though, because there's, the
iPhone generation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the millennials and Gen Z or whatever it is now.
I can't keep up with all that.
Yeah, that they were, that they seek value in healthcare and really in all things, and they are, they're obviously they embrace technology more, that they would want something that's more convenient, to kind of go back to the just kind of the Burger King analogy that you used. And so I was kind of surprised that no one, at least of that generation, had not really, at least in the context of our class, had embraced or had a telehealth visit. I thought it was interesting.
Now post-COVID, right? The genie's out the bottle.
Right, exactly.
Ain't going back in.
Exactly.
Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So, but what amazed me, and I'm going on your telehealth thing for a second, and this is why I find things just so backed up, because literally when in March of 2020, and I think you'll remember this, it was in March or maybe sometime very shortly thereafter, when lockdown started happening, right, when people became really scared, and I understand that feeling. They cut, meaning the government, Senate, CMS, DOJ, DHH, all of them band together and literally within like days cut the red tape on telemedicine that had been bogged down for 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
So within days.
Yes.
So it just shows you that when you can get it done.
Yeah.
You don't need to waste all this time.
And that was frustrating to see, right? Especially
from a regulatory, we do that. It's nuts.
I think you're right. DOJ and Office of Civil Rights from the HIPAA perspective.
Correct. You're right.
Like the platforms that had to be HIPAA compliant, they
eliminated.
Or they at least said they would.
It was a waiver,
like prosecutorial discretion.
That's right.
Like
That's right. That was the word. Right.
In order to facilitate, COVID response and things like that. But you're right. Like from, not to go down the kind of healthcare, policy wonk rabbit hole, but I mean, to get a telehealth visit paid by Medicare pre-March 2020.
Impossible. It was hard.
Yeah, and you had to, there's only a few things. You had to be in a correct location on both ends of the.
And I think the reimbursement was like lower than an actual face-to-face.
Right.
That's all changed.
Yeah, and so now it's like you can have it almost literally anywhere.
Kind of like law firm. I hate to say this. I mean, the law firm culture. Like I thought. So Katrina. I'm really pivoting here. So to get off the policy issue. So remember Katrina. Before Katrina in law firms, we would. I mean, I can remember wearing suits every day.
Oh yeah. Yep.
In 100-degree heat, right? You would sweat.
Yes.
And then after Katrina, it became business casual except Fridays.
Yes.
I'm sorry, business semi-casual. Because it was casual Fridays when we had suits, but then now post-COVID, now it's like I got attorneys telling me I want to work from home.
Right, exactly.
Like I want to be home working remotely. Do you see that too?
Oh yeah, and I think
I'm not saying at Phelps, but I mean just in our area
at Phelps and elsewhere. I mean, I think it's a reality of the situation, even outside the legal industry, but I think particularly inside the legal industry, there was so much movement, like post-COVID, when whether it was downsizing or some firms just didn't have the ability to kind of stay afloat. And I mean, not to, bring up anything that's going to give us all, including the audience, PTSD. But I mean, one of the things we saw was that in order to kind of compete for talent, you had to be open to things like remoting and
flex schedules, right. And more pay.
Yeah, exactly.
More pay.
Exactly. And, my view largely was like, I think that's a good thing. I think we need to evolve,
I agree.
In the legal industry and elsewhere. I mean, my youngest brother works for a large pharmaceutical company, and he was going into the office, and he's now fully remote. And
no kidding.
And they have a team meeting, I think once or twice a month, like for a couple days. So it's intense, but that's how they kind of keep engagement
on the team meeting, right?
Yeah. And everything else is Zoom and Teams. Now he's he's an IT director or systems director for a large pharmaceutical company, and they're manufacturing plants. I mean, he's got a wide range of responsibilities, but from the people aspect of it, he kind of created a home office, and I think they, he was kind of provided the support and resources to make sure that would function, and I think that's been interesting. What about you all? I mean, we did that. I mean, we've looked at attorney candidates that have wanted remoting. And
the problem in law firms, Beau, and I'll tell you this, the problem has been for us is convincing the older generation of partners that this is where we need to go.
Yes.
And that's been the challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, they are the generation that they want to physically see you in office.
Right.
And they feel like if you're not in office, then you're not working.
Right.
Or if you're not sitting in your seat and billing, you're not working. And we're trying to have to say, well, no, that's not the case.
Right. And I think that you're right. That is kind of a 1980s view of law firm life, right? I mean, and maybe I'm going back too far, but I mean, the idea of telecommuting was, that you had a laptop that was separate from your desktop, and you had to go, check it out and take it home with you and log into the system via Citrix and all that fun stuff. But, and now we don't, now we're much more nimble, right?
Well, nimble, but the technology's caught up.
That's what I'm saying. From a technology standpoint, like
my work inbox right here is on my home inbox.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I have to remote in, but the connection's solid.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, I'm probably more just my own personal view is I don't really care where you work. Like,
just get it done.
Yeah, and be available just like I would be available to you. Now, where I think there is just some natural shortcomings on that front is I think you do lose, in person, just personal engagement, connection, and I mean,
and I think a lot of young people miss that now.
If you do want peers and a peer group, and kind of thrive all that in your professional life, that's tough to do.
At home.
Exactly.
At home.
And I think you can lose some learning opportunities and things like that. But, whether you're a law firm or a, physician, or I'm sorry, a pharmaceutical company or whatever, I think,
it's here to stay.
Exactly.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah. That's why when people tell me like some of the policy issues we talked about in our class was about Medicare itself, the solvency and of the Social Security and things like that. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't think those are going anywhere.
Well, and it's I agree. And it's interesting to see where it's popped up. I mean, I was talking to in-house counsel of a large health system, not local, but they were Gulf Coast. But the lawyer I was talking to was in like North Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Fully remote.
No kidding.
Yeah. And he was like, I just applied for this, was looking to make a change. And
they picked him up.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Right. And this is all post-COVID stuff.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of changes are coming post-COVID, especially back to healthcare, what we do. I'm curious. What would you say would be some of the top things you're seeing now, generally speaking?
Yeah, sure.
That you're seeing coming down the pipe for healthcare?
So I'm just going to use the last 6 months just for anecdotal purposes.
Sure.
Does that work?
Yeah.
So I think private equity continues to be
dominant.
We're seeing it across, I'll just say the Phelps footprint, which is the Gulf South. primarily in orthopedics.
Yeah.
Some ENT and GI. I don't know if you've seen that.
Not yet. I mean, I've seen an ortho and neuro. Those are the two places.
And then
cardio.
And then ophthalmology, which I think
that's interesting.
That's been going on for a while, though, I think, because of all the different, kind of like ortho, all the different ancillaries you can
from the optimum.
Yeah. So I think that's our clients are going to continue to kind of see or entertain, those opportunities, with private equity. And I guess staying on that one before I move is like you had mentioned, I have not seen one unwind yet, but you had mentioned that you're starting to see.
I have had two that have unwound, and it was basically the sellers decided to say, okay, we're putting the brakes on this.
Right.
And I think it was only because private equity sounds great.
Yes.
Because of the multiples, they start with the beauty pageant. The multiples start really high.
Multiple sounds great.
Multiple sounds really great, right? But the way they do it, and I've seen this playbook now multiple times.
Right.
We're not even involved at the point where they start, and someone reaches out to one of the owners and says, "Oh, we're very interested in this. We're private equity, blah blah." We're looking at multiples of 10 plus more, right?
Right.
And then everyone's like, wow.
Yeah.
And so the older guys can't stop, they want to chomp at the bit, right?
Yes.
And so suddenly, then all of a sudden, okay, lawyers, we need an NDA. We're going to start here. The beauty pageant's going to start. And then as the process rolls forward, right? And I won't get into the maneuvering of the investment bankers and how that works with counsel. But anyway, say you're on, right? And as that moves forward, suddenly the multiple becomes less. It's, well, maybe now we're down to 9 or 8. And then, well, we're not going to give you the full buyout. You have to withhold some,
earn out,
a buyout or withheld. And so the big number slowly creeps down.
Which, I mean, is
and then the control issue comes in.
Yeah, there's the control.
The governance.
You're right. Once they get into due diligence, right, they just start to whittle away at it.
And that's purposeful.
Exactly. So,
and then the governance issue. I try to tell them, if I'm representing not the private equity, but the sellers, right? My always concern is governance. You be really, really careful of what you wish for.
Exactly. And I think that's where at least in my experience, you've seen a real generational fight between maybe the physician that's probably in the stage of career that is our age.
Oh yes, right.
Who's like,
so on the back nine,
but I'm still going to be here for the back 9, and then some of the guys that are
going into the golf shop, right? The men's lounge.
And they're like, well, that's great for you. Yeah, it's it's been an interesting dynamic. So other things we've seen. Was actually at a CLE a few weeks ago and got to hear a few U.S. attorneys kind of talk about current enforcement activity, and it's
anything that was interesting.
It's all the same stuff. It's just
repackaged.
So it's they're really starting to look at the COVID tests.
Oh yeah. I got a call about that last week.
I think DME is still hot.
I know DME, but the COVID home kits, that's a hot thing. Yeah.
Upcoding, is still big, like coding,
blatant,
or like no patient relationship, like all that kind of stuff.
Like just a code,
like the old school.
Oh my word!
Stuff.
How do people think they can just do that?
I don't know. It's crazy.
It's nuts.
Crazy. Yeah. So we've seen a little bit of that in terms of just. It was interesting to hear, and we've seen it in our own practice a little bit. I mean, in terms of people potentially having issues. Let's see.
Anything else on your radar?
Medical marijuana continues to be
I know you like that.
Yeah. I like it, but it's just been it's been a fun industry to dip our toes in.
That's cool.
It's continued to expand across, again, our footprint in the Gulf South. And it's...
You think of Louisiana, okay, I know, because I've been asked this, okay. I know right now, medical marijuana, Louisiana got the green light, right?
Yes.
So you know where I'm going with this. Is Louisiana going to become a recreational state down the road? Do you think that's in that cards, or is now the medical marijuana lobby going to try to stop that?
So that's a good question. Well, I also don't know if so it'll be interesting to see if it's rescheduled or descheduled on a federal level. Like, how does that?
Because that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So how does that
I
reconcile?
thought Biden might want to do that.
I think I think I saw it this week in the AHLA. I think they put forth maybe a reschedule, so they bump it from Schedule 1
to a 2
to where they could do other things with it that they can't do now, like research and things like that. But how does that trickle down on the state level? Because right now,
then the banks would open up.
Right, the banks would open up, but then, right now it's essentially a state-based regulatory scheme for medical marijuana or adult use, depending on where you are. But for Louisiana, like, will the Board of Pharmacy and LDH still regulate it, even if it's adult use or rec use, right? Like, and I wonder if, so in Louisiana, they made a conscious effort to focus on, making sure that, the Board of Pharmacy would kind of control the dispensary. So it's looked at as, any other pharmacy.
Legitimate.
Yeah. And
that's why the university's doing it.
Exactly. And so, so for right now, I think it's controlled in Louisiana, I think in a good way.
Right.
But I don't know what happens, let's say, and this is totally without any type of knowledge, but or it's totally anecdotal, is, if it went rec use, would the 9 or 10 dispensaries be the only places you could get it? It doesn't really change in terms of access. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And do you, does it, and then do you control it from a supply chain standpoint? On the cultivation side, does it stay with Southern and LSU? And so the market's still controlled just to guard against some of the, traditional concerns over marijuana.
Yeah, I could see that.
That would be my view. But I mean, ironically, because I think Louisiana gets a reputation that maybe is probably valid of being 50th or close to it in a lot of things. I mean, for
excuse me,
for medical marijuana, I mean, they were one of the early adopters. It was just more of a controlled environment, and they phased in the regulatory scheme.
I remember, just so you know this,
yeah.
I went to Ole Miss. That was my undergrad. Okay?
Yeah.
And then speaking of marijuana, this happened before medical marijuana even was a thing. They had the only legal marijuana growth or whatever it was in Oxford, because the government, I think the FDA, was doing some kind of tests with it, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember being told that if you drove around that, I mean, they had spotlights and guard towers, and they were like roving patrols. Well, like it was like a big, like a penitentiary. Well, I mean, it was big.
The security controls on these dispensaries are, the requirements that in order to operate as a dispensary. Just so
it's big. It's still,
and then
like you don't just walk in there willy nilly.
And then the grow facility is the same thing. And Mississippi just went live in the last year or so with its program.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. Medical only, not as controlled, and in terms of who can enter the marketplace.
Right.
So like, you and I, if we met the license requirements, could conceivably get a license to grow, process, dispense, whatever, provided we, met the statutory requirements. But it,
I mean, like coffee here.
That's all right.
Well,
so anyway, it's,
I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
My kids coughed. No, I got it. Anyway, well, look, I think I'm curious if we're going to become a rec state.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think it'd probably, again, saying without any knowledge, 5 to 10 years.
Excuse me. Well, 5 to 10. Well, look, you have the industry control now.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I think what we do is so interesting.
Yes.
I really enjoy what we do.
And we've covered a lot of ground here today on a variety of different things. So
I'm just happy you came in the studio. I mean, I've been trying to get you here for a while.
Well, I mean, we got this beautiful view. I mean, like I told you.
The people can't see this, but it's overlooking the lake. Isn't it nice?
You got this beautiful view. It's the canal place of Jefferson Parish, like I told you.
Is that what we call it?
That's
yes.
What
you can tell your partners about.
Canal place of Jefferson Parish.
Look, I really appreciate that. And let me just say this. I don't want this to be the only time we do this.
Oh, no,
I want you to come back.
No, let's keep doing it. Because what have we been talking about? 40, 45 minutes we could be doing this. We could talk another hour.
We could. I mean, on a specific topic. So, but I want to thank you for coming down.
Yeah.
I really do. And let's continue this going forward. So
I would love to be a special guest contributor or whatever.
I would love that, because we do different things, and I think it'd be great for the audience to listen to some of that. And look, if you're an audience member too, if you have an issue or a topic, please send us an email. My email cm@shahardy.com. Beau, what's your email?
It's beau.haynes, Haynes at Phelps, PHELPS.com. So
See, we don't discriminate here. We are open to all views. Okay,
and all law firms.
All law firms. It's about information.
Right. I agree.
I mean, look, we there's only a cadre of people that do what we do, and I'm happy to know you for as long as I have.
I appreciate that, and I've knowing you for the last 15 years as a friend and colleague, and teaching with you, it's been a lot of fun. So I appreciate you inviting me on, and I look forward to the next time, my friend.
Absolutely. Well, look, everyone, thank you very much for listening this episode on Health Law Talk at Shahardy Sherman Williams. Again, Beau Haynes, thank you for coming in. Conrad Meyer at the microphone. Enjoy. Send us your comments if you will. Have a great week, and do whatever you do best. You do you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Health Law Talk, presented by Shahardy Sherman Williams. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to give us that 5-star rating and share with your friends. Shahardy Sherman Williams is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does this podcast establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not count as an endorsement or recommendation by Shahardy Sherman Williams. The views expressed by guests on the show are their own, and their appearance does not imply an endorsement of them or their entity that they represent. Remember, please consult an attorney for your specific legal issues.